Hey, welcome to Lab, the podcast. We are up north Tampa at Tampa Covenant, one of my favorite churches that we discovered here in Tampa. And this is a beautiful, beautiful church led by an incredible group of people. One of those is Pastor Lou Kaloger, and he is maybe one of the wisest, kindest, and most humble people that we've met here in Tampa. And we can't wait to tell you about Tampa Covenant. Pastor Lou,
Zach,
it's so
pleasure
good
to
to
meet
see
you.
Yeah.
I don't know about what you said just now,
Yeah,
but it's
you
good
overheard
yeah,
the
I
intro.
did, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for letting us come up and see your church. This is absolutely a
Oh,
gift.
it's our honor. It
Yeah.
absolutely is.
We have been for months now just thinking about how the church, the Christian church, for thousands of years has been leading with beauty.
Yes.
And the Christian faith is deeply incarnational. It involves our body, it involves place and people in real spaces and time. It's one of the things that makes Christianity so wondrous and enchanting. And that comes home even in the way we worship all the way in 2025
Yeah.
in spaces like this. And your church is magnificent. It's a modern architecture, but it has ancient threads. And I couldn't help but notice it when we walked up. Tell us a little bit about just the church property, even as you walk up.
Yes. Oh, thanks so much, for Zach. You know, it was always our goal to be mindful of the community that we're a part of, to have architecture that looks Floridian, and we have basically a stucco outside to the church itself. It's a color that is common in Florida because of the heat. But at the same time, we wanted to be mindful that we are different than the neighborhood. So we have a structure with windows in the front. Well, we could have picked any number of windows, but we picked 12 windows up front because of the theological significance of that. We have trees in the front of the church. We could have had 4 trees. We could have had 2 trees. We picked 3 trees because of the Trinity, because of the significance of that number. But then specifically, we chose olive trees to be in the front of the church, again, because of the theological import of it. We recognize at the same time that we are a church with a past, not Tampa Covenant proper. We've only been here since 1985, but the church as a whole, we've been here for millennia. So we wanted to have some sense of old within this structure. And what we did is we purchased a bell that was from a church that had burnt to the ground in North Dakota. It's 160 years old right now, but it's there at the top of our tower, and we ring it every single Sunday. We ring it at funerals. We ring it at Easter. It is a part of not only this church community, but the neighborhood itself. They hear this bell ringing.
Yeah.
So,
It's incredible to think that that bell still goes out in kind of in an old world parish mentality, that those within the proximity of this church know that there's something different in time and space taking place. That's deeply embedded in the Christian story, but you're a Presbyterian church. Are there elements that are unique to that tradition within the Christian faith that already you can start to identify as you come into this, even before we walk through the doors?
Sure. Well, certainly, and this isn't unique to Presbyterianism, but the centrality of the work of Christ, the centrality of grace is just part of who we are. And we try to express that even in the architecture of this church, where the story of Jesus is constantly being brought before the people. You know, we are not a people that are called to be moralists. We're not called to be legalists. Sadly, sometimes within the church, we will see people beginning their faith as Christians, but then moving toward a legalism, as if the continued growth of the faith is based upon us and upon our good works and upon keeping our nose clean. And we, every single Sunday, want to reiterate that that's not the case, that it is Christ and Christ alone. So as a result, we try to communicate that even within the architecture of Tampa Covenant.
Yeah, it's preaching already. I noticed right here, there's this little space that you've created, and that story begins to appear even now as we're standing outside. What is this piece? And maybe we'll get a closer look at it as we go around the corner. But what's the story that's being told here?
Well, from the parking lot, as people are coming in, they're seeing an Alpha and Omega right there before the people, or right there on the church, as a clear reminder of the work of Christ himself. The Alpha is more of an ancient stylized Alpha. It looks kind of like a lambda, but it's there. But once you get through and get to the other side, you see a broader story being told. It's a story that starts in the Old Testament itself, where we see, for example, the Ark of the Covenant and the bronze laver with the bulls. You know, the bulls are facing in all four directions. It's a very evangelistic statement in a sense, to see that the power of God, the story of God, is to go to all corners of the earth. And in a certain sense, it's not unlike what we see in the book of Genesis with these four rivers moving in these directions, or what we see in the book of Revelation of the New Jerusalem and doors facing in all four directions, but without doors on them now. They're just openings as a way of communicating the faith going out into all the world. But then it's not a story that ends in the Old Testament, but it's a story that continues into the New Testament. So we have the crucified Christ and the resurrected Christ. And then the story of Revelation of the 24 elders and the myriads of myriads and the thousands of thousands. In the midst of it, the architects have included, I don't know if you could see here, a sense of the Fibonacci sequence, the golden mean, the golden ratio, as a way of communicating the Lord's sovereign hand even over the smallest details of nature. And then there's this right over here, and we'll come back to this a little later, but that's a very specific addition to this tableau that is before us and part of the story that's being told.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
We say it every single episode. Winston Churchill said, first we shape our buildings and thereafter they shape us.
Yes.
And I love the idea that generation to generation, kids, older people, people in every generation are passing through this corridor
Yes.
underneath this bell that's tolling and announcing something beautiful,
Right.
some good news is taking place. And beneath it, we're already being shaped by the entire story of God. The building is preaching before we ever go inside, which is extraordinary. I absolutely,
Zach, you
absolutely
said
love
that
it.
great.
Now,
Yeah, I
hey,
love that. I love
how
that.
long, when did you build the structure?
Well, we moved in, I believe, 2010 was our first service. And it took us a number of years. Part of it was some delays with the county, but it was fine because the delays really helped us. We put the basic structure up 5 years prior to moving in, but we really didn't know what to do with it. Then, fortunately, we received a phone call from some architects in town, Alfonso Architects, and Albert Alfonso, and later on his partner, Angel Del Monte, got involved in the project and just told us that they'd like to help. They understood that we were having some difficulty. This was a steel building. The floor was already poured, but we really had no idea of what to do inside or even outside the building. We had a few renderings that were utilitarian and not very attractive. They weren't consistent with who we were as a church, but our knowledge is limited. So they were able to bring good knowledge before us. I remember meeting with Albert that very first day. And the first thing he said to me, he had this huge table in his office with paper right across. He said, you know, we could begin drawing right now, but let's just talk theology. And for the next 3 hours, we talked theology. And in particular, we discussed the work of Robert Weber and the whole idea of the ancient future faith. That immediately sparked something in Albert's head and thought that that's something they could build upon. So what was designed by Albert and Angel was a structure that was clearly contemporary. I mean, this is a modern looking building, but within the building itself were little pockets of ancient. The number of windows, the trees, but other things as we go inside.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's extraordinary. If you're listening to this episode, one of the things that we wanted to do is highlight not just that these places exist, but they exist here. And if you're in Tampa, I just want to encourage you, you have to come and visit. And I want you to come and see, because we say all the time that we're not done making cathedrals. We're not done writing beautiful pieces of music. We're not done participating in ways with beauty that allow it to do what it's always done, which is point beyond itself.
Yeah.
And the church gets to be a community that leads with beauty in such a way that you can't step foot on the property without turning your vision up. And that happens inside. Can we go inside? And I want to
Absolutely.
take everybody on a tour inside, and we'll pick
Great.
up when we go inside.
Perfect.
All right. So this is absolutely beautiful. And the transition that is taking place, you can feel already that you're nested within a story. And that story is continuing as you go through. I turned around and I saw there's 3 doors here
That's
and
correct.
there's 2 doors here. And I would love for you to just talk about the significance of what we're nested
Right.
between here and there, because it's, again, it's a beautiful space where we get to hang out and see each other and rest, and there's beautiful art, but there's more taking place. There's more story unfolding as we step in here.
There is. Our architects wanted to look to the ancient cathedrals that are found particularly in Europe, and a very common feature is to have 3 doors on the outside, speaking of the Trinity, but then 2 doors in the inside, speaking of the hypostatic union, the Christ being both God and man, as a way of transition for our own lives. We do call this the narthex. It's tempting for members of our church to call it the lobby, but we correct them as politely as we can. And we do see it as a liminal space, as a space in between, where it becomes a point of transition from the world outside to a sacred world that is here. Now, it's not that we're holding the building to be precious in and of itself, but we know as a result of God's people gathering together for worship, something of heaven and earth kissing, and the veil becoming thinner occurs inside the sanctuary. So this becomes that transition point for us. As you see here, we do have artwork. This is a beautiful collection of pieces that we have enlarged and turned into banners and used throughout the years. This was created by Bonnie Van Voorst, one of the members and artists in our church, and it tells the story of the faith, beginning with the Annunciation and ending with the Ascension. And very specific stories are being told symbolically here. Now, less symbolically, a little more literally, we have actually Bonnie's mother's artwork. This is Linda Reynolds, and this is the visitation of Mary and Elizabeth. And originally, this was something that we used during the Advent season, and it was inside the sanctuary. But it was such a beautiful piece, and it told such a wonderful story that the idea of visitation and welcoming in this specific spot seemed appropriate. So, with Linda's permission, we moved it here.
What a beautiful, beautiful gift. I think one of the great gifts that you've given to the community and that God is making possible through the church, just in this moment in history, we feel in so many ways the loss of meaning,
Yes.
the loss of place, the loss of continuity to a story. We feel very dislocated. Nietzsche said with the death of God that we would feel as if we're falling forward and backward and sideward in all directions.
That is good.
And I think one of the great gifts of the Christian church is, whether it's very distant and we don't know our place in that story, the minute that you walk into this liminal space, you begin to feel that there is something other taking place,
Yes.
that you can be hidden within.
Yes.
And I think that sense, people are yearning for it. We need that. And if we underattend to the power of place in communicating that, we miss something really beautiful about the Christian faith. And I love that there's these 2 doors, that even in entering into the sanctuary, you're passing through the reality that fully God, fully man, only in that kiss can you come into the presence of God. It's phenomenal. Can we go inside?
Absolutely.
Wow. Oh, Lou, what a gift. I feel that sense of the liminal space, kind of, you leave that there, and it becomes quiet in here.
Yes.
And there's a sense of just permanence almost in this, the groundedness of this concrete floor and its slopes, which I love.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
That was deliberate. I mean, part of it is a utilitarian need for people in the back to be able to see as well as people in the front. But more than anything else, this was just a way of preventing this room from becoming anything other than a sanctuary in which we worship. I'm not putting down multi-purpose rooms, but there is something to be said for saying that we are to worship here and worship alone. So the pews are bolted to the floor is slanted, there are no basketball hoops on the side walls. This is a time where we gather together to see each other, but mainly to see the Lord, to hear his word, to experience his story.
Yeah. Thank you for the intention to create a space like that. Again, we underattend to these things. We just don't, and it's no fault of anyone. We're caught up and swept up in just the pragmatism and the efficiency of modernity. And so we place value in places that we, without knowing, we erase and lose something.
Yes.
and it takes a great cost to recover some of that.
Yeah.
And you had the foresight to participate in this. Who else was involved? You had great architects, you had a pastoral staff, you teach at the Robert Weber Institute, so you're informed by this perspective.
Yes.
But to accomplish something like this and to do it as a body, how did you involve people in the process?
Early on, well, from the very beginning, we had a committee of people, a building committee, and we were trying to work our way through different ideas. And the committee served a wonderful purpose in that we recognized that we wanted something that would would become a theology of place and a theology, I'm sorry, a theology of space and a theology of time.
Hmm.
So that was understood early on. How we were actually able to create this required the wise work of Albert Alfonso and Angel Del Monte as they heard our ideas and began to put, in a sense, brick and mortar to them.
Yeah. What a great gift. I think it's so fun to think there's regular people. This is
Mhm.
what I love again about the Christian story is there's
Yes,
ordinary people,
yes.
remarkably ordinary people, no mere mortals that throughout space and time and in the story give themselves to creating places informed with their theology
Hmm.
that will serve from generation to generation to do a great work. And again, it's not done. So we're in your debt, in the committee's debt, Tampa Covenant's debt, for creating such an incredible space. I want to be careful of your time, but I don't want to miss anything. Would you, just as we look across the sanctuary, help unfold some of the story
Sure.
that's being told within this space?
Again, we were trying to create a theology of space, which required, among other things, is to see that this isn't simply an auditorium in which we hear a sermon, though this is a room in which we do hear a sermon every single week, but something that could be interactive. So as a result, during the Lenten season, especially on Good Friday, we have people that are roaming through the church, adding candles to the candle box, coming before the altar, the communion table, and we see movement occurring. At the same time, we see here a theology of time that includes the pockets of old within that larger contemporary building, as I mentioned earlier. So, for example, we have beeswax candles that are really very much a part of the Eastern Orthodox tradition being placed into a Protestant church. We have a stone chapel with material that is unusual for the rest of this building. We have a communion table that is of marble and unlike anything we see in the rest of this building. The structure itself is Trinitarian in mindset, with the 7 boxes represent the days of creation, the 6 days of creation plus the day of rest, realizing that this is a Trinitarian effort. We have 3 candles in each box. Now that'll change during the year. During the Advent season, during the Lenten season, we'll do different things within those boxes. But it was the idea of first telling the story of God's work of creation. This front area communicates the story of Christ. The wooden slats over there on the far left serve a dual purpose. First, they do call back the older tradition of pipe organs. So even though we have a contemporary band that is there, we have these wooden slats that look like the pipes of a pipe organ. They also represent the incarnation itself of Christ coming down to earth, love coming down to earth and changing the earth as a result. The we see the cross here and the open tomb to the far right, the red piece. In addition, we see something interesting. There's that break within the ceiling itself that represents the veil of the temple being torn in two. Furthermore, the architects did something that's brilliant and wonderful. They've created a skylight that during the Lenten season, sometimes on Easter proper, sometimes a little before, sometimes after, because Easter is a movable feast, but a shaft of light comes down and right around that Easter season will end up hitting the cross itself.
That's incredible.
I joke that honestly, I don't care how decent the sermon is that particular Sunday. When that happens, eyes are suddenly on that light that is there. So it's just a wonderful addition where we're allowing, in a sense, God's creation itself to contribute in the telling of the story. Even the structure of the chancel is following the Fibonacci sequence and the golden mean, the golden ratio.
Mm. Everything ordered,
Everything
everything
ordered.
communicating,
Yes.
everything preaching. And yet, what I loved about that, the front area of the church, there's things that are there, but there's things that are not there. And maybe we can
Yes.
move a little bit closer.
Absolutely.
You you mentioned the open tomb
Yes.
and the story of the incarnation, and so your book ended by an incarnation and a resurrection. And then there's distinctly four pieces here. Talk about just the prominence that you have placed in these particular places, because
Yes.
it feels deliberate even in their orientation to each other.
Right. Much of the story of Christian architecture has focused on where is the presence of God to be found and how would we display that symbolically. In the Catholic and Orthodox tradition, it typically falls upon the altar. The Eucharist itself becomes that moment where the veil is the most thin, which is valid.
Mhm.
But in the Protestant tradition, it's been the preaching of the Word of God, where again the veil becomes most thin, and that is valid as well.
Hmm.
In the free church tradition, it's often been within the faces of the individuals. We are actually, after all, made in the image and likeness of Christ. So even part of our architecture being such where you're able to see your brothers and sisters was an attempt to replicate that idea. Now, in these different traditions, we might see these specific expressions displayed more prominently. For example, in a Quaker setting, you are literally looking at the people on the other side of the aisle. In the Catholic Church and Orthodox Church, the altar itself is a huge, predominant piece of the entire sanctuary. Everything else is built upon it. It especially in the Reformation days, the pulpit itself was lifted and high with a stairway going up to it. So there was an effort to put the accent
Hmm.
on one or
Hmm.
other of these specific items. We're trying to acknowledge all
Hmm.
three of them, so it's there. At the same time, we recognize that the work of ministry isn't simply the work of the pastors, but it's also the work of the people. I mean, that is what liturgy itself means. So our lectern is up here, and we have um, individuals from the congregation that are reading the passage for the day, and it's predominant. It's in a clear spot where we could say, here is the work of the people as the scripture is being read that'll later be preached upon.
Hmm. I can't just, I want to jump up and down. Riley, our producer, would throw something at me, but I'm literally
Okay.
jumping out of my skin because so much of this, we just have no idea.
Yeah.
Even growing up in the church, we know intuitively that there's something that gives me peace. I
Yes.
feel anchored to something that has continuity and is much bigger than myself.
Yeah.
We know all that intuitively, but we don't have language for it.
Yes.
And even the deliberate intention to not just hit those notes individually, but to hit a chord that has
Right.
all of those, the Eucharist and the
Yes.
elevation of God's word, the
Yes.
power of being made in his image, all of those being particularly done. That's what has me jumping out of my skin. That's why I love
I love
what
that. I
Tampa
love that.
Covenant has
Yes.
done.
Thank you.
I still am caught, even this veil, in this veil being torn and us seeing through to Christ, both the incarnation and the resurrection. It's all beneath this really deliberate set of sconces above us. And I
Yeah.
want to ask you, if you can, maybe we'll walk back up to the front and look
Okay.
back at it because you get a really good view. But I know that there's a story to these, and there's a particular color even up front. Would you just tell the story of what is above us? Because we always talk about one of the things we love about great cathedrals, they draw your vision up.
Yeah.
And this set of sconces does that in a particular way.
Yeah. It does. It's not the most efficient use of light. We really didn't need the sconces. We would have had plenty of light in the sanctuary otherwise. But I remember one day meeting with Albert Alfonso, and he talked about the idea of, um, well, there's an individual, a philosopher, his name's Goethe, and Goethe spoke of architecture as frozen music.
Mm.
So he says, yeah, that's an idea that we've played around with. He told us about another church structure that they had designed that, in a sense, took notation and made it part of the sanctuary itself. So we were talking about these sconce lights, and maybe there's something we could do with them. And we're playing around. Should we have 10? Should we have 7? Should we have 3? And then we started talking about the Stations of the Cross. So traditionally, there are 14 Stations of the Cross, and thought, well, maybe we could do something with that. So we have Christ in Gethsemane, Judas betraying Christ. We have the Christ before the Sanhedrin, on and on. Peter's denial, all the way until his burial. Interestingly, the 13th station with the red ring represents Christ dying.
Mm.
So it's not an accident that there are only 2 red items on this in this entire sanctuary. It's that ring on that particular pendant light and the tomb itself. So the recognition of Christ
Mm.
and the necessity of his work. But in the meantime, based on Albert's encouragement, we thought, well, maybe there's something we could do with rings on these specific pendant lights. So I remember meeting with the gentleman who was then our worship arts pastor, Rodney Shores, and we began playing around with different ideas. And then suddenly Rodney's doing this. We're in Barnes & Noble, and he's playing piano pretend on a table. And we recognized that we could create, that there was a specific hymn that began with 14 notes. So you see a pattern here.
Mm.
One ring represents do, 2 rings represents re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. So you have 3, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 3. Okay, it's what this is the first line of "O Sacred Head Now Wounded."
Mm.
So the song itself is portrayed with these sconce pendant lights, but it's also here on this wooden wall that's up on the ceiling. So this piece on the ceiling represents the Via Dolorosa, the road toward Calvary that Christ walked, and you see that it ends at the cross itself and eventually to the open tomb. So it was a way of telling the story of the faith, even architecturally.
Mm.
So in our songs, in our creeds, in the sermon, but even in the space itself, we're telling the gospel story.
It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. I read a quote the other day from an artist. I'm not going to remember who they were. They said, "Art decorates space, music decorates time."
I love that.
Love that. You've done both,
Yeah.
which is extraordinary. We say it all the time, but beauty helps us discover what is good so we can know what is true.
Yeah. Yes.
And I think your church leading with beauty in the way that it does this not just through great preaching, but through the creation of a place where space and time, everything is ordering to
Right.
help you beautifully step into what is good and know what is true. It's remarkable. I want to turn to this stone chapel.
Yes.
Andrew Gould, a Orthodox architect that I got to speak with, said that anytime he's constructing a sanctuary space, he's mindful of the local place. He pays attention to where are we and the materials and the story of that place. But he says there's always a third element. There's always an exotic, a something other, some other piece that comes from outside that place and time, and to include that. And when you walk in here, this strikes you
Yes.
immediately.
It
Can
does
we
me,
walk?
yeah.
Yeah, let's walk in and
Okay.
literally you feel with the change in elements, the change in dimensions, that you're entering another layer of other. So let's step inside. We made it.
Yeah.
We are inside the stone chapel, and we've been sitting here for a few minutes now, and this is the same feeling that I had when you allowed us to tour the building the first time. It gets quieter and quieter and quieter. Outside, I'm aware that I've stepped onto property that is other. It
Yes.
feels like here, the neighborhood, but it's not.
Yeah.
And then I pass through 3 doors into a liminal space that makes me pay attention that something is changing, there's something taking place. And I pass through 2 doors and into a sanctuary where I'm nested within space and time,
Yeah.
everything preaching, everything declaring the glory of God. And then there's an invitation in the corner to this very exotic place, because exotic in the sense that it's not from here. It seems to be very other, like it came from a different time, a different place.
Yeah.
How did you arrive at the decision to put the expense and the cost and the inefficiency to
Yes.
include even the shape of this space and to locate a stone chapel within the sanctuary. How did that conversation even begin?
It isn't the most practical idea, is it?
It's one of my favorite ideas, by
Um,
the way.
Originally, this was going to be a choir rehearsal room, and we were going to have a prayer room with drywall in paint over on the other side of the hallway. And then Albert Alfonso gave me a call one day and had this idea. He said, "What if we what if we switched the two? What if we put the choir rehearsal room there and put the prayer chapel here? And what if the prayer chapel looked like this? So it was oval shaped, covered with stone." Immediately we began talking about the metaphor of the Holy Spirit and the idea of the Holy Spirit bringing the church together. The oval reminded us of the rushing wind that we read of in Acts 2, but then also using Peter's language of us being stones that are fitted together. The idea of stone seemed interesting to us. It's not like identical hermetically sealed bricks that have a nice layer of cement between each of the bricks so we don't have to be too close to each other. But no, the stones end up sacrificing something. They get chipped a little bit in order to fit into specific spots. So I remember then getting together with the other pastors for a regular pastors meeting, Eric Meyer and Rodney Shores and Rick Trammell at the time. And uh, Albert has this idea. Do you think we could do anything with this room besides have prayer? And within a half hour, we had 20 ideas, including weddings and baptisms and prayer services and Lenten services. So it's become a really beautiful central feature of this church. And not only on Sundays, every Sunday after the service, we invite people that are in need of prayer to come in here for prayer. But also during the week, members of our church will come in and the lights are on a slider. They may shut off all of the lights except for that skylight that's behind me and just use this as a time of prayer. Personally, during difficult times, I'll just come in here and seek the Lord and turn on the light a little bit, enough to read scripture, but using this as a point of solace and as a point of meeting, which is good.
To be able to have this place within the sanctuary, I
Yeah.
think also just prioritizes the
Yes.
prominence and the place of prayer
Yeah.
in the life of the church. You've been a pastor for 25 years.
Yes.
If somebody's listening to this conversation and they say, I feel like I need that, I've wanted a place where I can pray, I feel like I am exhausted, I need to pray.
Yeah.
Do I have to go find a stone chapel located in a sanctuary that feels like that? Just as a pastor,
Right.
what do you say to the person who goes, I wish I was sitting with those guys right now because I want to feel
Right.
that sense of presence of God
Yes.
and the ability to speak to him.
Yeah.
What would you say to that person who maybe is on the other side of the country and can't find a chapel like this, but senses within this conversation the power
Hmm.
and purpose of prayer in their life?
I don't think it's an accident that Jesus went out into the wilderness to pray. He could have certainly prayed from whatever cot he was sleeping on that night, from whatever home he was at. But there is something about space that enhances and contributes to our call toward prayer. And I find that I have my devotions on in a certain spot every single week, or every single day. Sorry, not just week. And there's something about that space, and something about that cup of coffee, and something about that specific Bible. Even though I have many other Bibles, but that specific Bible that I pull out that becomes central. And maybe it's the familiar nature of it, but also it's the sacred nature of it. God is in the business of creating sacred space. We look at the story of Scripture, and it is a story of space. I mean, it's a story of people and places and dialogue, but it's also a story that begins in a garden and goes to the wilderness and eventually into Egypt and then back into the wilderness and then to a tabernacle and then a temple and eventually a manger and from a manger to a cross and from a cross to a tomb and from a tomb the new heavens and the new earth. So it is a story told through plot and character and dialogue, but it's also a story told through spaces and places. The story of Jonah is a story of spaces and places. The story of Esther is a series of 10 banquets. The story of Jacob or as a story of stones. So we see these kinds of themes, these artifacts or spaces or places being not just secondary features of the story, but characters in the story itself.
That sense of an embodied faith
Mm-hmm.
is just, I think so many people feel a desire to return back to that. I think in the Protestant West in America, many people, myself included, who felt distant from the church for a long time,
Yeah.
felt like the theology, there was beauty to it, but it was drifting away. It was disembodied. It was an
Right.
idea out here.
Oh, yeah.
And really, Christian theology is life together here, stone on stone. And there's something so beautiful about the idea that God would dwell within a human creature and that we have particular places.
Yeah.
And just extraordinary. I don't know if you can preach that in a sermon without a place like this. I think it's my conviction more and more that first we shape our buildings, thereafter they shape us.
Yes.
And we don't need a building like this, but we can pay attention to our places and to the places where we are cultivating tables in our home, places where we read our devotionals. And I think if you're listening to this, I want to give you two invitations. One is if you don't have a church, I hope what's coming through is that place is important and having a place to go and to worship and time is important. Even meeting on the first day of the week
Mm-hmm.
and meeting in a particular place and not doing it alone. These are deeply, deeply important things to what it is to be human and to be what it is to be a part of the family of God. And so go find a local church. And if you don't have a local church, reach out to us. We'll help you find something in your area. If you're in Tampa, and you don't have a local church, I want to encourage you to come visit Tampa Covenant. And it's just been extraordinary to get to share this time. And so I want to make that invitation. The second invitation I want to make is that we can learn to lead with beauty, right?
Mm-hmm.
The church helps us find our way in so many ways. But as a pastor, you've got grandkids, you've got kids. In our moment, to create places and spaces in our home that shape us well.
Mm-hmm.
If you could give an encouragement to a mom and a dad who've got young kids, maybe the age of your grandkids, and they go, wow, I love what Tampa Covenant has done there. My house feels like chaos.
Yeah.
I feel like we're coming and going and passing at all times and places. I wish it felt like a little sanctuary.
Yes.
What's a small encouragement that you could make to a family that they can do at home
Yeah.
to maybe order space and time, to give it a sense of transcendence and maybe a beauty that points beyond?
Mm-hmm. It's hard, especially when children are young.
Yeah.
And I remember in the early days, it was just difficult. Kids seem to love to get up a half hour before we want to get up, and that becomes hard. So for many young moms, young dads, maybe it ends up being the end of the day. And instead of turning on Netflix, maybe the TV is off, and we use that time and we find that spot to seek the Lord and to use a good devotional, for example. I love Gibbon's book, Be That My Vision. I think he's just done an excellent job creating a daily devotional, including readings that walk you through scripture over that year, but also bring you to the prayers of the past. But it is to just simply do the effort to find that space. We do create space naturally. It's interesting. You go to a hotel room, and maybe you're not like this, Zach. I'm like this. First thing I do if I'm traveling is I'll start rearranging the room to some degree, or I'll bring out those artifacts that remind me of home, or I'll decide, am I staying long enough where I should put the clothes inside the dresser and hang them on the rack, or am I just going to be living out of the suitcase? But we make those kinds of decisions because we recognize that we are creatures that are designed to create space, to do what Churchill said. I love, there's a guy, A.T. Robinson. He was a bishop in the 1950s, 1960s. In 1960, he wrote a book on space and place. And in it, here's what he said. He said, the building always wins until and unless we can make it say something else.
Oh, wow.
And I think that's helpful for us, whether it's in a church setting. And most individuals who are leaders of churches will either build a building or remodel a building sometime within their ministry. And all of us are in a place where we are going to move from one space to the next. Can we do something to reshape that space in order to tell a new story and a better story?
Yeah. And what story to tell. I
Yeah.
think that's the beauty of having a pastor in our
Yes.
lives, having a good pastor and a church to, if we know nothing of the language of the Bible, we saw that etching outside and we said, wow, I've never heard these layers of the story. There's an invitation to
Yeah.
come back and to find the story that is our story.
Yes.
And so that we can go out and create meaningful places and inhabit meaningful time. The church was the keeper of time forever, up
Right.
until the modern era, and now it's a debate of who's the keeper of time. But the church for so long ordered time,
Mm-hmm.
and your church still follows a sacred time. And we're
Yes.
about to move into the Advent season. What's that like for Tampa Covenant?
It's been a journey. The idea of pulling back on some things that we want to mention up front has been a challenge for the church. We want to treat Christmas, the Christmas season, as something that begins immediately after Thanksgiving, and that we're singing all the songs of the Christmas season from the very beginning, largely because that's what we hear in the malls, that's what we see on the Hallmark Channel around the clock. But to pull back a little bit and say, no, this is an Advent season. It's not the Christmas season yet. And we want to use this season to do something different, to, in a sense, take inventory, to discover what it means to wait, to think about the second coming, to use the first coming as a way of thinking of the second coming. And that takes discipline, and it's taken years. There have been times where, especially early on, there was a little bit of resistance to it, but it's kind of like good food and good coffee. It's espresso is difficult to drink right off the bat, but once you develop that palate for it, you can't imagine drinking anything else. So it's much like that with the liturgical season. Same thing with the Lenten season.
Yeah. Well, it's a great invitation to not rush, not crash ahead to the Christmas. Feels like
Yes.
all the inertia wants to push us now and quickly.
Right.
But what a great invitation. And I love that the Advent season is coming up. I can't imagine how beautiful it is at Tampa Covenant. So,
We do a lot of things during that season, yes. And the space itself, while it tells a story that we've already discussed, it's also in a sense a blank canvas where we're able to add more artwork. So through the Advent season, we'll bring specific works of art. This particular Advent season, I'm very excited about the work that Sarah Cisco and the rest of the Worship Space Committee will be putting together. Likewise, during the Lenten season, Maundy Thursday has a specific look. Good Friday has a specific look. Easter has a specific look. Sometimes we tend to try to flatten that pyramid, and we want to treat Good Friday as if it's Easter Sunday. So the pastor is up there saying, "Don't worry, Jesus rose, rose from the dead. Let's sing Christ the Lord is risen today." No. Let's let the pain of Good Friday have its way with us. So we end up with a service on our Good Fridays where the entire sanctuary is dark and quiet, and people slowly leave the sanctuary as they feel so led. Recognizing that come Easter Sunday, we will party and we will celebrate and we will be joyful, but let's let Maundy Thursday be what it's supposed to be. Let's let Good Friday be what it's supposed to be. Let's let Holy Saturday, where we're in the strangest liminal space betwixt and between, be what it's supposed to be, and let that time shape us in real time, not just a single teaching on a single Sunday going through all of Holy Week, but walking through Holy Week in real time.
it's incredible.
Yeah.
It requires such attention, such thought, such cost, such careful attention to do what you are doing at Tampa Covenant.
Yes.
And so thank you for that. I think in our moment, drained of meaning and significance, all of us are feeling it. The church at its best
Yes.
is doing exactly what Tampa Covenant is doing in the world. And so we're grateful for it. I know I got to be careful with your time. For somebody listening who is in Portland, Oregon, or up in the Midwest, they're freezing cold, and somebody sends them this. They haven't found a church that feels like home.
Right.
They don't have a Tampa Covenant in their area. What advice do you give to people that are trying to find a church, and maybe they've tried and they haven't had success and they just kind of gave up, or maybe they know somebody in their family who's facing that situation? How do you encourage people to think about, or what do you encourage people to think about in order to find a church in their area?
There are no perfect churches. Even Tampa Covenant Church is not a perfect church by any means. I do think that sometimes we can overlook the good in our quest toward that which is perfect. One of my favorite books is a book titled "A Gentleman in Moscow," and much the basic story of A Gentleman in Moscow is a man who was an aristocrat, but due to the Bolshevik Revolution, ends up being placed under house arrest inside a hotel, and not the best rooms of the hotel, but kind of a crummy section of the hotel. But nevertheless, over those many, many, many years that he's there, he finds notes of grace, where he finds a place where he could read his newspaper. And he develops a relationship with the chef where he's able to enjoy a good meal and a good glass of wine. And so I think sometimes we can go to a setting that might not be ideal, but we still find those grace notes that are helpful. Now, I will say an important grace note is a call to mission. Our pastor, Mark Farrell, is deeply, deeply focused on our call to mission and to recognize that we're in this neighborhood for a specific reason. Which, by the way, I don't know if you picked up on this, but the oval shape of this chapel and that skylight right there was represented on that tableau that we saw earlier. It's the recognition that the story of the faith is continuing even now. So that which began in a garden and ends in the New Jerusalem includes this church at this time in this specific call that's taken place. So if we find the gospel being preached, maybe not completely identical to the style we would like, and songs that are being sung, to just allow for that as a place where we could grow and learn and be stretched. And we may find out that we were wrong.
Yeah.
And that, in fact, the expression that it's taken place there, it is of continued value. So,
Yeah. Thank you. You've been so generous with your time, letting us walk all over your property and tell us the story. And we're in your debt for the education and just the opportunity for us to widen our imagination about being the church. So, Pastor Lou, thank
good.
you.
Appreciate
it.
you.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
take care.
Thank you.